The trial has also sparked national calls for meaningful police reform, not just from activists, but from some police officers as well. The president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives released a statement saying, in part, quote, "There is hope that this verdict continues the momentum of legislative reform, that reckless, careless, and malicious acts against citizens will meet punitive consequences." Lynda Williams is the president of that organization and the one who made that statement, and she is here to discuss it with us. Thank you so much for being with us, Ms. Williams. Let me just first ask you how you are reacting to the verdict, the guilty verdict of Derek Chauvin, and how are other black police officers in your network feeling?
Thank you for having me. First of all, it's a bittersweet moment. We have been calling for police reform. So that verdict, the guilty verdict, was a step in accountability. And that's what we need in law enforcement, that to have that accountability and transparency to build that trust in the communities that we serve.
So the mission of your organization is to strive for equity in the administration of justice. What is your group doing to bring that about?
So Noble has been on the forefront since 1976. And we're just as relevant today as we were 45 years ago. We serve as the conscience of law enforcement by being committed to justice by action. Over 50% of the major cities in the United States are led by Noble members, chiefs, and sheriffs. And so we led the push for a national standards of use of force, accountability, and training. And so we offer that through our organization, but we give feedback, and we partner with our civic group, judicial activities, to show that, we are community oriented, that no one is above the law, and that we are to serve as guardians and not warriors in our communities.
What institutional changes need to be made within police departments to better serve their communities and to support other black and other minority officers?
This is a time in our country where all stakeholders that are really sincere about change and enacting real reform to reimagine law enforcement. They take a look at our judicial system, civic and law enforcement officials, to be accountable, to look at the police policies and practices, the training, and then even supervision of that. We can't continue how we have been, or we'll keep getting the same results. So there has to be accountability, there has to be national laws, but most importantly, that there has to be consequences when law enforcement officers do less than what they should, and that they are not good stewards of the judicial system, as it enacts the rights of every citizen and not limited to some.
Since the murder of George Floyd sparked a national movement, there have been increasing calls for reducing funds for police departments. Some people say defunding the police. I think I prefer reforming public safety. I think it's a better phrase, because we are talking about putting money into social workers or mental health services or homeless services. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on these efforts.
Yes, one of my key signature agenda items was a task force entitled Reimagining Public Safety. And we provided a blueprint just how that comes into play. Now, if you ask one of my students, they'll say do away with the police, but as executive law enforcement executives, when we reimagine it, it's not taking away funding, it's reappropriating funds or additional funds. That law enforcement is tasked with so many responsibilities, but that should be an intentional coordination with our social services as we deal with mental health, when we deal with homelessness and drug abuse and things like this. So don't take away, let's realign it along with our social services so that united, we make a better front and we care for the citizens.
Lawmakers across the country are now pushing legislation to limit qualified immunity for officers. What's your organization's stance on that issue?
Even as Noble looks at that and revisit, absolutely we need to look at it. Because the thing about it, qualified immunity shouldn't be a blanket or a cover for an officer to do unconstitutional acts. If you do what you're supposed to do, then of course you will be protected. But yes, we need to look at that very doctrine, because the very history of it was not based on just equality. So yes, we need to revisit it. And, and that's not to say to leave law enforcement personnel out there to dry, but to make sure that they're accountable. And then when they're accountable, then of course their agency will provide for them the safety net that they need. But qualified immunity has been taken out of context, and that it has served as a blanket for doing, unconstitutional and rogue and the use of force.
This is not the first time that we've seen video go viral, confrontations between police and members of the Black community and others. This is not the first time we've heard about a high-profile court case. I want to ask you if you think that this case in particular, though, is a pivotal moment, and if you do think it is, why?
It is. This trial shows so many things. It illustrated the long history of how law enforcement has disproportionately responded to and reacted to enforce laws in Black and brown communities. So this is an opportunity, not that we could ever bring George Floyd or any other lives back, but an opportunity to acknowledge the disparities and then take ownership to enact real reform.
All right, Lynda Williams, thank you so much for speaking with us.
And thank you for having me.